All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Holly Lynn Lee, and we're going to kick off our first STEAM webinar for the 2019-20 school year. And I am going to hit record so that we have this and we can post it for later. Well, it says I need to request recording permission from the host. Okay, so that may or may not work, but I believe that it's already recording in the cloud. So we're hopefully, hopefully good. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And I actually have very kind of minimalist slides because we're going to actually spend a lot of time in the Esteem place looking at some materials, but just wanted to kind of kick us off of what the focus is for today. So actually, I think I'm going to come back. So the webinar goals for today are to kind of learn about some of the key updates that we did in summer 2019. We're going to spend about 30 minutes of our time hearing from 3 faculty implementers, and then we're going to experience some of the key STEAM activities in the foundation module, probably just one that is significantly different, and then diving into the inferential reasoning module, and really kind of highlight some of the ways that the materials are trying to scaffold and connect kind of across modules. So that's going to be one of our themes today. So I think all of you have seen at some point this diagram, but just to really kind of re-emphasize that we do build these as a modular approach. We like to in that way, our team is really trying to think conceptually, what makes sense to package together, and then where do we want to give faculty lots of different choices. And of course, we recognize that faculty always have choices of what they choose to use, and that's one of the reasons I've asked some faculty to share kind of what they've done. But conceptually, we feel like the foundation and statistics teaching module together as a 1.1 and 1.2 provide a really strong core for helping secondary teachers really think about what is needed. And we made that a purposeful decision, knowing that a lot of institutions may only have 2 to 3 weeks at best that they could even mention the idea of teaching statistics to their secondary or middle school teachers. And so we wanted to try to provide something that could be used in that context. And then other places have lots of other different opportunities where pre-service teachers have to learn. And so we also realized in 2 to 3 weeks in the foundation, you're not going to go deep dive into a lot of the statistics content. Where we wanted in our the second and third modules, Module A and Module B, even though they are numbered A and B, they can be done in either order. That we really are taking that more concentrated look into particular content areas in statistics, and having a much stronger blend of content and pedagogy in those two modules. Each of our modules does have 2 parts to it, so that if you really have to cut back, if you can keep a conceptual part together, that you kind of have that option. We have 2 major assignments. As you can tell from our diagram, the screencast assignment could be done after the foundation module. We feel like students have had enough that they could reasonably take a stab at that assignment. They could also do it after or within doing the inferential reasoning module, or within doing the association module. They could also do it after all 3 of these modules. So the screencast assignment could fit in kind of anywhere after they've had a strong foundation. The task design assignment really, you need to have gone through, we feel that teachers really should have gone through the foundation module plus one of the other modules before, or a good amount of another module before really doing the task design, because they're just not, they've just not had enough time and processing to kind of really think about what might make a good task. And later in today, I'll talk about some of the key experiences across the modules that really prepare pre-service teachers to do well in that task design assignment. So each of our modules, as I said, has 2 parts. Each part is about 5 to 8 hours of materials. That does vary across the different parts. We've tried to adjust the hours as we learn from more implementers of how long it takes to do things. We always have a read and watch section that includes kind of essential materials, readings, videos, that could include a quiz, or it could include kind of interactives. So essential materials are not just passively reading and watching, that there could be interactive things that students are asked to do, pre-service teachers are asked to do in those. Learning from practice does always include videos that are really situated in classrooms or talking with teachers or experts, so that it's very tied to the idea of learning about your job that you're getting ready to do. Engaging with data is just that. There's always our investigations with CodeApp are situated within that. Sometimes there's a focus on pedagogical aspects of the investigations that live within that. And our synthesize and apply really try to reach across a part of a module or across 2 parts, and really having the teachers think about how to bring some things together and either have a rich discussion or maybe do a quick reflection. They might not be that quick, but a brief reflection paper. But there's usually some, again, either a discussion or a reflection or designing of an activity that is part of that assignment at the end for synthesizing and apply. So some key updates for some that happened in summer. One thing is that we've had a lot of questions from faculty of, can I adapt this? Can I reuse this? And so we want to make it clear that on each of our pages, we do now have the Esteem logo on each page, and we'll go into the module in a second to actually visualize that. And we have the logo for the Creative Commons license. We are putting all of our stuff out there as a Creative Commons license to really clarify that you are able to adapt and reuse for similar purposes, but you cannot reuse them for commercial purposes. So you may not take our materials and then adapt them for a commercial money-making for-profit purpose. Always giving the attribution back to the Esteem project and any adaptations you might do. We've provided more support for using CodeApp. We've heard kind of loud and clear that faculty and teachers really want that more concentrated support for using CodeApp and how it kind of looks in the classroom. So there's some key support materials in there. And anytime that we provide a classroom video, we try to make these videos short enough, but sometimes when they're too short, you lose the richness of where is this school? Like, what are these kids in the middle of a statistics unit? You kind of lose the context of where the video was taken. And so we've tried to provide, without providing a long description, a little bit more information about the context of these classroom videos. And then people have been great about reporting different typos and just minor things or things that were confusing. And we've made lots of minor edits all throughout the modules. The major updates for the foundation module are that and we're gonna spend a little bit of time looking at this, a few of these, that the 1.1G is a revised investigation. It's the same data set, it's the same 31 roller coasters, but we removed aspects of using Tuva in it. And so we've decided to only focus on CODAP there rather than introducing another technology. And we took out some parts that were reported as being confusing and have a new CODAP file and a new PDF that really emphasizes how students might be introduced to thinking about the structure of a bigger data set. And we'll talk about that more a little bit later. But that meant that if we removed things with Tuva, we had to change 1.1i and to remove kind of comparing and contrasting those two tools. And in 1.2, the second part of the foundation module, we heard a lot about some of the difficulties that pre-service teachers were having in G, H, and I. And so we revised all of those. And again, I'll go into a little bit more detail about those. But those are the major things that got updated in the foundation module. So if you have not implemented the foundation module yet in the fall, and you're maybe getting ready to think about it for the spring, there's gonna be parts of it that are gonna look different than what you've done before. Okay. The major updates for Mod A, B, and the assignments. So first of all, both Mod A and B now have a second part. We didn't have those fully built in the spring. So now they both have two parts. So that was a major accomplishment. We've also made sure that in both of the modules that we're making very purposeful and explicit connections back to Mod 1 to build from it. And so that there's a more purposeful effort to kind of scaffold and connect things across the modules, which does mean that the foundation module really is an important part of the learning experience before students do Mod A and B. And I've already talked about the fact that Mod A and B both have a much stronger content focus, along with that critical pedagogy. The task design has much better directions and suggestions, and one of our webinars in the spring is going to kind of dive deeper into what we've been learning about teachers' experiences with a lot of the different module materials that will include the task design assignment. And our screencast assignment actually was supposed to be updated this summer, and it accidentally got left off of our checklist of things of checking before we released things in August. But actually just today, we made sure that that was updated. And the major change with the screencast assignment is that we changed the choices of the data sets and the questions for people to pursue so that there was less overlap with the major investigations that were happening in the other modules. So that they're not doing, so for example, the vehicle data set appears in different ways in both the Inferential Reasoning module and the Statistical Association module. So we took that out as an option for doing something with the screencast, because we want the screencast to represent a unique opportunity for the teachers to demonstrate them doing an investigation that we haven't already kind of walked them through. So we felt like giving new data sets were an important aspect to that. So what I want to do is now go back, and I apologize for these being out of order, is we have on the place, oops, oh, I'm supposed to not be logged in. Sorry, log out. Okay, so if you go to the main landing page at the Friday Institute, we've made a new way to get into the STEAM module so that other people can find it. So this is part of our effort of kind of expanding our reach, so that we're going to spend a lot of effort this coming school year in trying to expand the ways that people can find out about our materials. So this is one of the ways. So if you are sharing, if you'd like to invite your colleagues that you talk with to actually go in and check out the STEAM materials, this would be the way for you to be able to share the to share a web page with them that they can easily enroll now and kind of join our group. Okay. So I wanted to show that to you, and I'm now going to go ahead and log in. And I'm obviously enrolled in a lot of courses at the place. Your list probably is a lot smaller, but I'm going to go to my courses and resources and go to Esteem. And wanted to make sure that we are continuing to kind of bring forward the things that have been things that are changing and things that we want you all to pay attention to. So the first is that the Esteem project, the word e-modules is part of our acronym. We are committed to initially designing things to be used in an online setting, but we absolutely know that people are going to adapt these for face-to-face and hybrid settings. So it's not that we are preventing people from using it in those kinds of ways, but everyone who gets a hold of our materials needs to realize that they were designed for an online space as the primary design principle. And then as a faculty member, you need to think about, well, then how can I adapt some of these to be thinking about using it in whatever setting I teach in. We also wanted to make sure that our thank yous to the NSF are a little bit more prominent, and that, again, that these are being shared under a Creative Commons attribution, non-commercial, share alike public license, and you can click on this and actually read the terms of that license if you're interested in it. So again, kind of making it a little bit more apparent who made these materials and what you're allowed to do with them. The exports you can still find over here on the right-hand side. And again, making it very clear that if you're getting ready to download these, this is the version that was released in August 2019. And so if you click on Moodle and you download the Moodle package, it is everything that was released in August 2019. Same is true for all of these. And we recognize that some people don't like to change as quickly. And if you would like to use materials that were the prior versions, you can click on this prior version, and we are keeping an archive of the older versions. So if you really, really liked the versions that were used before and you want to kind of go back to them, this is where you can find them. All right. We hope that you will use the updated ones, but we want to honor and understand that a lot of faculty want to maintain kind of the same things that they've done before. So if you lost your download, you can come back here and find it. And then we have, so one of the things that I was discussing is changing things that are at the bottom of the page. So all of our pages now have the Creative Commons, again, that is clickable, as well as the Esteem logo. And if you hover over that Esteem logo, it also has a clickable URL that can take you to our project page. So that even when you have this in your LMS system, people can click on this to find out about who developed these materials and how you can use them. So before I go too far into a lot of the, some of the ways that these materials are building from each other and really diving into the inferential reasoning, I want to turn it over to the three faculty members that have generously agreed to be with us today. So we have Nina Bailey and Kristen Lessig and Liza Bondurant. And I'm not sure if Liza is here quite yet. I know she was gonna, we put her purposely last because she had a previous commitment that she wasn't able to join till about 11:45. But I've asked each of them to just share a little bit with some of the materials that they've used, why they decided to use those, the course context that they're using them in, and kind of just some bigger lessons learned. And then we can ask some questions. But I want to pause before I do that. I should have asked, does anyone have a question about some of the major updates that were done? Anything that I've said in the last 15 minutes that you had a question about? And you can, you would probably have to unmute your microphone to ask a question. All right, so without any questions, then I'm going to turn it over to Nina, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. All right, I have to go to a different view. Stop the share. And then Nina, you should be able to share your screen. And I'm going to mute myself. And
all right, can everyone see my screen? Okay, perfect. So I'm Nina, and I've been working in a slightly different context probably than most people who use these materials. I've been teaching undergraduate introductory statistics courses. And this particular course was for the social sciences. And in that course, I get a variety of students. This semester, I only actually had one future teacher of the 19 students in the class, but I decided to kind of adapt and use some of the materials here. Where's the presentation button in here? Oh. So the materials that I used are listed at the bottom. So I used a lot from the kind of introductory part of the esteem materials, and then I used the Schoolopoly task. So I'm going to kind of focus in on Schoolopoly. So some of the adaptations that I used, I actually have a lot of different types of die, both fair and unfair. So I had the students actually kind of play around and just sort of try to guess whether their die was actually fair or unfair before digging into Schoolopoly and working with the simulation, just so they had that hands-on context. I also challenged my students to think about what's the fewest number of samples, or in terms of they can also change the sample size that they wanted to use to make an appropriate decision. So that was one extra challenge that I used. And I had them work in small groups. So there were about 3 people per group. And as they worked through, I had the large sticky notes for them to kind of record and create their own evidence that they were going to present to the class. And the rules were that they could put whatever they wanted on this large sticky, but they weren't allowed to verbally explain it. So at the end, they put those all around the classroom, and we voted on who had the best evidence. And then for homework, I added an online discussion forum for them to think about what constitutes quality evidence. So those were just a few of the adaptations that I made to the Schoolopoly. So some of the challenges that I saw was that all of my students really understood that there was an expected amount of variation. They knew that they were all going to get different results. However, they had very different ideas about how much variation was expected. And some of them, even though they knew that we were expecting variation, they didn't tolerate it very well. A lot of them focused on the expected value or finding a uniform distribution, and were very frustrated by the variation throughout the process. They were even less tolerant of variation when they were voting. So the large sticky that won the vote was the most uniform histogram that was presented. But interestingly enough, it had the smallest number of samples. So it was certainly a good conversation piece. They all also had very different ideas about how much data they needed to make an informed decision. So that was another really good discussion point as we moved in. So what I called my proud teacher moments. So there was really great conversation about sample size, effect size, although they weren't quite using that terminology, quality evidence, and what really made me proud is I saw this throughout the rest of the semester. And many of these students came back to the Schoolopoly task and said, remember when we did this? This is why this is important. And I even saw that when we moved into more formal inference. Compared to my previous classes, I saw less major misconceptions when we moved into formal inference, which I thought was really important and pretty awesome. And they had much better language and kind of prior experience to be able to talk about sampling distributions, which is typically something that's really hard for undergraduate students. And I think my favorite part was just that their argumentation for the remainder of the semester was vastly improved. So those were my big takeaways. And then I know this wasn't part of Schoolopoly, but I did actually on the very first day of class this semester ask my students to think about what the difference between statistics and mathematics was. And they had just finished telling me how most of them were extremely nervous about statistics, very uncomfortable, high anxiety. And I had one group who drew this picture. And they explained it as a square is always a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square. And they said statistics includes math, but is so much more than math. And for day one, I was blown away, especially considering they just told me they were terrified of the course. So I thought that was really powerful and just wanted to share it. So that's kind of a big summary. I figure we can open it up to any questions or.
So I've got a question, Nina. Could you go back to slide 1 as far as I wanted to remind myself of some of the materials that you had used. So a lot of the beginning, 1.1 A and B, kind of setting the stage of stats and math and habits of mind that are used in statistics. I think that that's great that you were able to actually use those readings. So did you have your students read those materials, or were they part of what you discussed in class? How did you use those?
I did have them read them, but on day one, they hadn't done anything yet. And that's where I got that beautiful statistics as a rectangle.
Yeah.
And that was before they read anything. So
before they read it. That's nice. That's nice. But it seems like that those two documents are might be ways for someone who's teaching a pure content course to just help situate the class in.
Absolutely. I found that the habits,
different.
Yeah, the habits of mind really set the stage for how we were going to do things in the class for the rest of the semester. And that was extremely helpful because they knew what to expect and how they were going to dig into the investigation.
So I have another question, but I want to just pause and see if others have a question.
While people are thinking of questions, I will say it was surprisingly easy to kind of adapt this to a content course and face-to-face. I didn't have too many challenges with doing that.
So one of the things that I was thinking about was going back to what you said were some of the challenges with the Schoolopoly, about them, anticipating this expected value and them not really appreciating variation a whole lot. And when I think, so Schoolopoly is a task in the first part of Module A. And so even though it looks like you didn't use any of the beginning parts of Module A, what were some of the experiences around repeated samplings, around kind of models that your students may have had before doing Schoolopoly, instead of the first part of the inference module?
They had minimal experience. I decided to use this kind of at the beginning to give them the context to be able to talk about those things. And so after the voting is when we had the whole class discussion, and that's when we really dug into, did anybody notice that, the group that you said had the best evidence, only had 2 samples of size 30 versus if we look at all the other stickies around the room, what did we see? And so while it wasn't something that they necessarily noticed at the outset, the conversation afterwards was extremely rich.
Yeah. So I'm gonna share my screen real quick, just as a particularly since you did use some of the readings in the first part of the foundation module. I'm wondering if thinking about what is inferential reasoning or promoting key aspects of inferential reasoning might, if experiences with some of these things might be useful before doing the Schoolopoly task next time.
I absolutely think so. We did talk a little bit about what is meant by inferential reasoning, but I didn't use any of those readings. And looking back, I think they would be helpful.
Yeah. I think because there is, one of the things that I'm thinking about is this idea of repeated, like you said, like one of the groups was using small samples, but theirs seemed to be kind of a highly valued evidence because it was all even. It was it was showing a histogram that was all kind of even, or a bar graph that was even. Thinking about variation from sample to sample to sample might help the students think about, well, I did a sample, maybe they did a sample of 25. Well, but if I do a sample of 25 again, I might not get one that looks all that even.
And I was hoping that by having the experience with the actual die beforehand, where everyone rolled it a certain number of times and we talked about what they got, would provide that. But I think they need the additional experience and reasoning and conversations before doing this.
Yeah, I really like the fact that you had that hands-on experience first, so that they perhaps, I have had particularly middle school students, when I've used this task before, kind of not even conceive that a die could be unfair. Like, well, of course a die is fair. And so I'm going to search for evidence to kind of like fix it so that it does look like it's fair, because die are supposed to be fair. And so they would kind of just throw out any sample that they got where it didn't look fair. So it was like a search to prove that it's fair rather than a search to see what the actual distribution is.
Right.
Yeah. So, all right, good. Well, I'm going to stop sharing and let's go with Kristen.
We're going to hope that I know how to share my screen. I don't know. We'll see.
Let's see. So if you might have to make your Zoom window a little bit bigger so that you can see the icons at the bottom of the screen. And there will be a share button. There you go. Looks like you are.
It did, but is it sharing like the whole giant screen or just the one?
I am seeing your whole screen, so I can see your mountains in the background.
Okay. Maybe if I just go to there, then you just see my screen. Better?
There we go.
Okay. So my context is quite the opposite of what you just heard from Nina. So I taught it for the first time this past summer. And it was a teaching concepts in probability and statistics course in the College of Education. So it was the first of 5 courses in our middle level mathematics endorsement program. So the program itself is for typically for students in the elementary education program. So they're getting their BA in elementary education. They can add these 5 additional courses to also get a middle level math endorsement. So 4 of the courses are very content and teaching focused, and then the 5th is a methods course. So in this context, this was a 6-week summer course. I know, 6 weeks, right? So we met 2 days a week, 3 hours each. And our context is also very unique because we have students across 3 of our campuses. So I had 22 students across 3 sites. So the majority, I would say like 12, 13 or so were in my location in Vancouver. And then I also had students that are together in a classroom, but we see them via video screen in Pullman and Tri-Cities. So the Vancouver students were all juniors, so we've set it up that this is the first course that they take. Some of the students on the other sites, it wasn't necessarily their first course, or they weren't all juniors, but they were all in elementary teacher prep programs. So I went through the foundations module and the associations module, and then their final course project was actually the task design assignment. And so this was the first time I'd ever taught the teaching prop stats course. So I took the opportunity to totally revamp what it used to be and use this kind of as the focus. So I actually really loved using the foundations module to begin with, and just, opening up that discussion around what's the difference between statistics and mathematics. And that was kind of a theme throughout the whole course. So that was kind of like their big touchstone theme throughout the whole course about what is the difference between them. And then in terms of like how it was actually set up, because we already had, this hybridness with the different sites, and it's summer. It also made sense to them to like, whoa, I don't want to have to go to campus every day. So typically like their Monday, so the Monday session would mostly be, they do these online assignments and things would be due. So they had done, especially like the read watch things, right? So the read watch components, they do prior to class on the Wednesday. So on the Wednesday we do, maybe do an extended reflection on some of the module materials and then do some other things. So I also supplemented with some exercises in the Stats for K-8 Educators book, because their own stats knowledge is limited, as was mine. Readings from the EU series on essential understandings of probability and statistics, and MTMS articles. So I don't know if I should pause here. And I think I'm going to pause here and see if there's any questions about the content or context.
I think it was clear to me, and I love that you actually had this opportunity of being able to use our materials in this kind of hybrid setting, and the fact that you had people across different sites. I'm really interested just to kind of hear how things went. So
yeah, I have like a lot of slides on that. So I think it went well. Like I said, it fit our context in terms of everything was easily accessible on Blackboard, and in these courses, because we have these 3 different sites, we do use like the Blackboard discussion forums already a lot, right? Because that's a way that they can actually interact across the different sites. So it's a familiar platform for the students, so that wasn't really a problem. Yeah, so in terms of like so I did go back. I know some of this is clear. So I just went back and looked at the final course evaluations when I was thinking about what to present here, and I was like, oh, I need to look at those again and see, what they felt. And so again, these are also just comments, and students could choose to write a comment or not. So naturally you get the people with complaints, but that's still useful. So I will say overall, so in our course evaluations, part 3 is about the instructor and how helpful or not helpful they were. And then part 2 is about course design and how helpful the course components are. So these are kind of pulled from there. And I will say overall, all of those scores were quite high, right? So they're all like towards the 4. I don't remember the actual numbers, but they're all towards a 4. So in general, they really felt they learned a lot, and the course was set up to help them do that. So you see they really liked using CodeApp and that technology. But then most of the things were either the modules were a little confusing, so there were some of them where there were glitches or the modules were a little confusing. Someone specifically commented that they wish they could get 2 tries at least on the quizzes, because the quizzes could be beneficial, but they were really challenging. So I modified a lot, and I was like really clear that, you know, your score on these quizzes is not like your grade is not dependent on your score on these quizzes, right? I use them more of as a formative assessment, and then I could like look at where they struggled on the quizzes, and then we talk about those in class. So I use the quizzes as a formative assessment, but that also took a lot of like easing down some anxiety of students. It's okay that you got 2 out of 10 or whatever, but we need to talk about these now. And then a lot of it, like a lot of people were like, I wish we had less module work and more in-class work, right? And probably because a lot of times they were doing the modules on their own. So I'm wondering also about how to maybe encourage more, you know, on those Mondays, if you want to make a study group, go through the module with a partner or something. So that's some of the things I was thinking about in terms of adjustments, maybe.
Yeah, and I wonder too, I don't know if it maybe in any of your other classes, you've even created, you know, like short 3-minute videos of like you kind of introducing, like, okay, this is what you're getting ready to do, and this is why we're doing this.
Yeah.
That might help kind of set the stage of, you know, here's my teacher telling me what she wants me to learn, you know, from the activities I'm getting ready to do.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment just from another world of mine, like the research on like flipped classrooms, that the videos where the instructor themselves is the one doing the talking, students find so much more beneficial than like this outside, right. In our case, right, it's these outside people talking at you.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, so just finding ways to kind of weave in your voice of what you want them to attend to, or why you're having them go through, you know, this stuff ahead of time because they're getting ready to do something when you come face to face, you know.
Right. Or it could be like on the, like in my case, like the Wednesday at the end of that class is like, I do like a little, like in class, do a little like, here's what's coming up, and do a bit more introduction into the next one instead of, okay, before next week, watch module 1.1D. Right? Yeah. Maybe give them a little upfront, and here's what it's about, and here's what I want you to take from it. But, and I'll just end with this cheery slide of, here's some images from one of their final things that they did together in class, like in that last week of just like summarizing the course and their big ideas. I don't even know if you can see those. It's really fuzzy when I do that. It's clear on my screen, but it's fuzzy when I share. But you'll see a lot of cool keywords, and you're like, yes, they remember the SASE framework, etc. So that's it. What other questions?
Let's see. Would anybody like to ask Kristen a question?
So since you used more than I did, I'm intrigued to see what kind of investigation or which part of the modules do you think the students enjoyed the most or resonated with the most?
I don't remember. This was summer. This is now the end of fall. Like I said, I know they love like they actually like doing the code app investigations themselves. And so a lot of times they would do it ahead of time, but when they got to come together in class and work on them again, I think they enjoyed that part for sure. And probably the more of like the classroom videos, right? Because they want to, because again, these are people that are just thinking about being teachers. So any opportunity to look at student work or see what the students are doing with around the ideas, those were probably the things that really captured them.
Did you do both so I don't think both parts of the association module were out then, was it? So did you only use part A with the categorical association?
Right, we did the categorical.
Yeah, part one, sorry, part one, yeah. Do you think that?
We did the lines of best fit. Like we went through, yeah, B.1. Yeah, it's all B.1. Is that how it's labeled?
Yes.
Right. Yes, it's all B.1.
Okay, okay. All right, cool. And I really like how you said that this theme of math versus stat kind of, was taken throughout. Do you feel like even when they were working with the categorical association and even then doing you said you used the task design as a final project, could you tell that do you feel like your teachers were really starting to design lesson plans that looked more statsy than mathy?
I think so. Stephanie, have you looked at them yet?
Stephanie had to step away.
Oh, darn it.
Yeah, she just put it.
But yeah, yes, I think so. I mean, again, just that idea of variation was very clear about how this is different. So.
Okay.
And obviously the association module like highlights that as well, right? Thinking about like what is good enough to say there's an association.
All right, good. All right, thank you. And if you can figure out how to stop sharing your screen, then we're going to pass it to Liza.
Done.
Yay. All right.
Can y'all hear me okay?
I can see your screen.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, super. My slides are not as fancy. I had this in a Word document and then I saw a slide. So I was like, let me put these in a slideshow. So, all right. So I used just the introductory module and I did it in my methods for secondary math class, which would be like the semester before student teaching. Currently, we just have one class for the secondary that does kind of more pedagogy than content. So that was the class that we did it in. Since we currently only have one class, I was really only able to do the introductory module. But the good news is that I have some program changes going through that I'm going to have 3 classes. So next year, I'm going to have more time and I really want to do more of the modules. So this section right here, I really highlighted why should we teach it? What is statistics and why should we teach it? And now I'm going to go into lessons learned. So this is a lesson learned that I didn't do, but I wish I did do. I start the semester with them having a field experience where they go into middle school and then a high school and they teach a lesson. So they like observe and they meet with the teachers and write the lesson plan, teach the lesson, all that kind of stuff. And that takes a month and a half. And I wish I would have done this before I did the field experiences because I found that this changed their thinking about what teaching and learning is. And I think I would have gotten out of them the kind of lesson plans that I was looking for more. And I think they would have understood why I wanted those kind of lesson plans more if we would have done this before the field experiences. So next year will be the next time I have a methods. I'm going to definitely do this before doing the field experiences. And I'll say more about this in a moment. So one thing that I did do, which I will continue to do, is before doing the ESTEAM intro module, talk to the students about the future job market and how that would impact their teaching. And I did that through having them watch or listen to a couple of videos and podcasts. And I picked these up along the way, attending, I think, something ESTEAM and just some other stuff I've been paying attention to. So this first one is America's Math Curriculum Doesn't Add Up. And if you haven't listened to this yourself, it's very worth your time. And then I'm pretty sure this is a classic. I'm sure everyone has heard of this one, Teach Statistics Before Calculus. And then I'll go to the next slide. And then this one is a reading article about the Future Jobs Report. And so I did all of this before doing the ESTEAM to get them to understand why statistics is so important, and B, get them to change the way they do their lesson plans, because I was trying to say to them, you can't have just lecture and practice, because future jobs are not going to demand those skills. You know, future jobs are going to require A, a lot of statistics and data analysis, and B, a lot of critical thinking and investigations and so on. So I really tried to drill that point in. And I wonder, Holly, this is kind of some feedback for you, if you might want to incorporate this into the introductory module, because I kind of supplemented it to add it.
Yeah. No, I've been sitting here thinking, so it's so funny because I think I do a lot of that stuff in a lot of the talks that I give, but we don't have it in the, you're absolutely right that it's not there as a motivating factor of why teach statistics. And I think you're absolutely right. And I love the resources that you were using to do it. Great.
Yeah, I think I got them from you, so.
Yeah.
I just wanted to jump in and say, I love those too, and can we put those into the, so put those into the module, or I just need to remember to add those to the opening. So can I just add like one thing we also did like around that is I have a colleague in the math department that's 2 doors down. And she is in statistics and basically models whale populations and all these other things. So she actually came and spoke to my students as well about about her role and how it plays out in the real world. So
yeah, I think that these are both just really important ways that we need to start changing the conversation about why statistics is so important and why dealing with data is so important, so that our teachers are convinced that, you know, it's not just about squeezing it in before the test. It's really, you know, something that is probably going to impact their learners in their daily life and their future careers more than some of the other materials that they teach. So yay, I'm excited.
Super, yeah.
Yeah, Liza, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, and I did find that, you know, after they did the ESTEAM thing is when they do their full unit plan that they don't actually teach, but then those unit plans had the kind of lessons that I was looking for. Because, you know, they would hand in a lesson and I would say, okay, so what skills is this, what job would this prepare them for? To be a machine. Well, it's not the Industrial Revolution anymore. So what are we going to do about that? So, and just, you know, having more real world connections. And I think they got that, you know, from how the investigation style of the ESTEAM, I think they got that more from that. So, because unfortunately not all of my, the lessons that they get here in college are even, you know, we don't always practice what we preach. So that's unfortunate that they haven't seen a lot of what I'm telling them to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, that was kind of the precursor. And then, so these were kind of the points that I hoped that they would get from the introductory module. And I feel like they did. Yeah, and both of the other presenters have talked about these, so I won't say a ton. I will say that last spring, I did this also with my quantitative reasoning class, which is kind of like math for liberal arts majors. I just did the roller coaster investigation because they do some baby stats in that class. And those are some gen ed students that I learned the lesson that it's better to have them work in partners. I had them individual, and then I was like, I was like, you guys just group together, because I was like a ping pong ball answering questions. And it was, once they were partnered up, they were talking to each other and solving the problems together. So it worked a lot better with partners with them. And yeah, I assigned the reading quizzes and online discussion for homework prior to, and then with my method students, and then they did the investigation and we had a follow-up discussion in class. So that's how I did it. And I think that's my last slide. Yes. So that's it for my slides.
Yeah, so any other questions for Liza? I loved hearing that you felt like that they were designing in their unit plans towards, at the end, that the lesson plans were much more statistics, and connected to the real world. I'm sure that was influenced not only by you insisting. So what job is this going to prepare people to do, but hopefully also because of their experiences and in the modules and in part 1 and part 2. I'm curious with I know Nina is gone, but I don't think she used these activities. But how did so this is a question for both Kristen and Liza. When they had a chance to take a look at particularly the videos of students working with the roller coaster data. So after they've done the roller coaster investigation and they get a chance to see what students do, and then they get to see how you can kind of pay attention to what students do and kind of and have a whole class discussion around students' ideas. Were those videos useful in getting your pre-service teachers to kind of attend to instructional practices and what students do?
So they watch those for me outside of class, but one thing I had them do is, they're working on their predicting of solution strategies and misconceptions and all that. So that was a nice way to kind of have them self-assess, what they had predicted and if it was accurate or not, or how close it was to accurate. Because I think that that's something that you kind of can only get from experience. Mm-hmm. So having those videos were helpful because they could look at that before they taught that, and that would be ideal because if they didn't know the, the misconceptions and different strategies, then they could see that.
Right. I don't know that how much work. They also watch those prior to the class. But I will say for me, it just, because again, it's the first course. They haven't even really started any teacher ed course, or they're concurrently taking their first teacher prep courses or whatever. So for me, it just sets the, some of the norms around how we're going to talk about teaching and learn about teaching, which I think Liza also had in her slides, that idea that first you think about the mathematics and then you anticipate and think about how students might do it. But then when you look at student work or see the video, the first thing is, what do students seem to understand? So we always start with, what do they seem to understand? And then move on to, what do they need to further understand? So. Yeah.
All right, good. So I'm going to go into the esteem modules, and I am going to encourage you all to go there too, because there's going to be some active participation in some of the things we're gonna take a look at.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I had a quick question, if it's okay, before we move on.
Sure.
Liza, I was just wondering about how, I saw you use the reading, the quiz, the online discussions. I'm thinking about doing a similar model and then doing the investigation in class. I'm not real thrilled about moderating online discussions. And I'm wondering how much moderating you did. That can really chew up a lot of time for me in my kind of own experience in the past. Can you speak to that, or maybe someone else speak to how they've managed that? Did you invest a lot of time into moderating those discussions, or just let them go and follow up in class?
So since it is a face-to-face class, I didn't spend a ton of time. I did read it beforehand, and then I talked about it with them face-to-face. I also have 2 students in that class, so that makes life a lot easier. There's not 30 or 100 comments to read, but I have taught online, and I have taught online with larger sections. And I do know what you mean, John, that can, if it was online, I would have to invest time and, you know, responding to everyone and da. And if it was larger class, it would be very time consuming. But in my case, small N, and it was a face-to-face, it wasn't time consuming.
Yeah, I'll probably have 15 to 20 students, and I just can imagine trying to read all of the comments and then respond to them. And then, you know, I should read them. It'll help me to prepare for class. But the managing of that, I think I would like to view the online discussion as a chance for them to sort of unpack their thinking and share it with others, have preliminary conversations, but not to rely too much on that as being a chance for me to correct misunderstandings and so on. And I just wanted to get people's thoughts on that. I think that structure might work well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
guess
so-
I was I was trying to figure out what your hesitancy or was. So if it was like the time factor, you were worried about like wrong ideas out there. So I monitor them in the sense that I read them and provide feedback, but it's not necessarily to correct a mathematical thing or whatever, other than to, let's think, maybe this is a good thing we can think more about or something. But
Yeah.
I don't feel like the discussions in the modules are not really around math content. I mean, they could potentially, you know, raise a misconception that one of the students has, but they're really more like reflective pieces about, like, you know, I don't know, Holly, help me out. They're more reflective pieces, right? So
Right.
the quizzes on the other hand have some math components.
Yeah, I shouldn't just say it's misconceptions, but the reading with intent to provide feedback is different from just reading with the intent to think about what I'm going to do, how that's going to inform my teaching in the next class session. And this would be hybrid for me as well. I would take these as homework assignments, and then they would prepare us for the investigations in our next class. So I'm looking for any tips people have. How hands-off can I be and still have the online discussions not fall apart?
So I tend to be a little bit more hands-off. It might sound like reverse, but I tend to be more hands-off at the beginning to let them form their community, unless I see something where I want to kind of push the conversation a little bit further. So at the beginning, I might do more of, so could you expand a little bit more on the point that you just made? Because, you know, I'd like to hear more about, you know, because maybe they just, what they wrote just didn't go quite deep enough. But I'm kind of hands off, and then towards the end, whenever we really established a community, not just among them, but also including me, then I think what I tend to see is that they push each other and they're comfortable with me pushing them even further as well. And I do not take the standpoint that I have to respond to every single post that people have done, but I use Moodle, and we have the option of rating forum discussions or forum posts, as well as like scoring them like a 1, 2, 3 or a 0, 1 even. So sometimes I'll just do a 0, 1 just so that it communicates to the student, I read this, you know. So it's like, okay, you know, you're getting a 1 here because you posted it, you know, I read it, and that just signifies to them that I'm reading it, but I'm not necessarily reflecting on it or I mean responding to it. But anytime that we have, so I've used the esteem materials a lot in purely online, but it has a mix of asynchronous, and then every couple weeks we have like a Zoom meeting where we're all together, and then I'll bring some of the ideas forward from the discussions. That way they know, oh, you are, you are paying attention to what we're saying.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll even copy, without somebody's name attached to it, copy a comment from a discussion that I want to actually bring forward. And, you know, people might remember who said that, but I'm not drawing attention to who said it in the whole group discussion.
Thanks.
Can I briefly share something about discussions happening
Yes,
in my
absolutely.
class? So I taught the modules last spring, and it was a face-to-face class. And one day in class, early in the semester, I was having a hard time getting my students to discuss in class.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was having them discuss one of the questions from the online discussions, but face-to-face. And then I said, okay, how do you feel about discussing online right now? And we were in class. And everyone started typing up, and they had a lot to share that they did online right there in class. And then I had them read what the classmates were posting. And then we go back to the in-class discussion, and it was a really good discussion. And so I did that a few more times during the semester, where if they didn't feel like talking, I directed them to go and have these conversations online.
Yeah.
And that helped with the face-to-face discussion as well.
I love that. I mean, I think it's kind of similar to this like think, pair, share, where sometimes people just need time to reflect on themselves before they share it out, you know, and so they're not in the mood, or they're not at a place where they want to kind of share their ideas publicly, but then having them privately kind of write down what their ideas are, and then respond to each other kind of, you know, in that discussion forum, even though they're sitting in the same room. I thought that is a great teacher move.
It was a big surprise to me that they had so much to say, but they would initially didn't want to speak up.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. I think that signifies that you're also just trying to create that safe space for them. And, you know, here's an alternative way we can use the technology to create that safe space. So cool. Anybody else want to share insights on discussion forums before we move on? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And we've got about a half an hour left. So let me close also, everyone can kind of see here. So I'm back in our esteemed place looking at our modules, and two quick things that I want to draw your attention to about changes in the foundation module, and then we're going to jump to the inferential reasoning. So in 1.1, I had made the point earlier that we changed something about the first investigation. So we removed tuba. We certainly kept this idea of the fact that you have to launch an investigation in a critical way. We have found that in our own use of the materials to really be a strong kind of pedagogical messaging around statistical investigation, that the context is so critically important, and how you choose to introduce things to students is important. And I'm going to share a little bit later something that's in the inferential reasoning module that builds upon this explicitly. So I mentioned that we are, that we added, I'm going to make the text, oops, go away, text a little bit bigger here so you all can see it if you are not in there. But we're providing a little bit more support for CODAP. So if you are, if your students are kind of uncomfortable in using CODAP, we have four different ways that they can, you know, start getting familiar with it. We certainly don't promote this, okay, you have to take a whole day out of your class to teach people how to use CodeApp. We feel like it's pretty intuitive to use, but certainly you need some help along the way. And once you learn some basics, that can help. So this brief video was there before, but we're drawing a little bit more careful attention to it. And the getting started of part 1 and part 2, these were created by the Concord Consortium team. These are really great brief tutorials that can help yourself or your teachers to get kind of up and running on CodeApp, because it gives them some challenge tasks of, can you do this? Can you do this? And then drawing people's attention to the For Educators page that has a lot of different resources on it for CodeApp. The last thing, because of different copyright restriction with NCTM, even though several of us here on the Esteem team are the authors of this article, we're not able to redistribute it within the Esteem materials. But down in the references, we do have a link to it. So if you are a NCTM member, you can get access to this brief article that came out this summer on exploring data with CodeApp, and it uses the roller coaster data as an example. And so this can be a nice kind of reading to either help you or your students. A key thing, so we have, one of the feedback we heard was it would be nice to not just have PDFs, but to also have Word documents of assignments, so that if you want to change things or break it apart into different things, that as a faculty member, you have the option to do that. So we have both the Word and the PDF here. I'm going to open up the PDF to highlight that we really changed the beginning of this investigation to think about, we purposely have, this is their first experience with a bigger data set. 31 cases is not that big, but it has more than 2 variables in it. And so for many students, that's the first time they've actually seen a data set or worked with a data set that has more than 2 variables in it. And really building upon the strengths of what used to be or what still is, in Tinkerplots, that is now available in CodeApp, where you can view a data set as case cards. And it really kind of illustrates that each case in this collection is a roller coaster. And each roller coaster has some different attributes to it. And as you can think about this as a stacked, a stack of index cards. So if we click on this investigation, the data set, rather than opening up in a table, opens up as a card. And then I can change this to a table view. So again, the main questions there, the main differences there was to really get students to think about that you can see data in these 2 different ways, and that a lot of, we know a lot of research has pointed to that the role of a case in a data set is really critically important. And so we felt like starting this activity out in case card view would help students kind of, help our teachers kind of think about that. The other questions on this, I think, were just more, there were minor changes after that to this. Yeah, I'm looking through here. I don't think the questions change much after that, but I just wanted to make you aware of that, because particularly if you've used the other data set, when you yourself open it up, you might be like, hey, wait a minute, where's the data? All right, so it's viewed as a case card. The other major change in the first module is coming down here in part 2, where we made, we cleaned up some things with the 1.2G investigation, making these a little bit more clear. It's not major changes, but the examining students' work. So these are videos focused on what students do. We found, we really got some feedback that people wanted to structure a little bit differently. So one of the things we did was we time-stamped where in the video you can see the different pairs of students, because we changed this assignment to focus just on 2 pairs of students to analyze. So rather than asking questions that were really, really broad, we were finding that the feedback we were getting from faculty, including our own use of the modules, is that people were either choosing the question that used to be in the other version that they thought was the easiest, or they were just kind of scratching the surface of things. So we decided to really revamp this activity to hopefully give them a better opportunity to think about being focused and being reflective. And so those of you that have used these before, I'll be curious once you use these new versions, if you see kind of a difference in the ways that teachers attend to students' work and students' thinking. The other feedback we got was related to 1.2i, and you know, here we were trying to make a very strong connection to the 5 practices model for a productive classroom conversation. And previously, you know, even though some of the same words were on this page, the 3-page paper was, it seemed like it was kind of linked in a almost like, well, you can learn more about this if you click here, rather than this is something you're supposed to do. So, and that we really want you to read it. And so we made it a part of the assignment, so that it comes across more that this is something you're supposed to do before you move on. So they should be reading this, then watching the video, and then part 3 is reflecting on the students and making explicit connection to the 5 practices models in their discussion and what they write. So I think we also changed that this used to say 1 to 2 pages, and we felt like 2 to 3 was probably based on the faculty members that had given this assignment, that they found that that many of their teachers who did a better job at this assignment were writing closer to the 2 or 3 rather than just a single page. So we went ahead and expanded that. Of course, as a faculty member, you always have the choice to change any of these, but this is kind of our best thinking about what might provide a good kind of ending here. Because this is an opportunity for them to kind of synthesize things across the foundation module. The analyzing tasks and discuss, I don't think changed at all. So analyzing tasks is still and thinking about the role of the task is still a critical kind of thing that happens across our modules. So before I move on to the inferential reasoning, any questions about changes to the foundation module or comments? Okay, so the inferential reasoning module, 8.1, for those of you that attended a workshop this past spring, 8.1 was pretty much done, and this summer only kind of minor enhancements or edits were made to it. But the real key thing that I want to draw attention to is that between 8.1 and 8.2 is really building up this idea with inferential reasoning that the models, a modeling process and taking samples and repeated samples and really understanding kind of the role of sampling distribution is very critical in promoting inferential reasoning. And so we really suggest that if you're implementing these materials, that for as much as you can, try to use a lot of the parts, a lot of the individual assignments, because they are kind of a conceptual whole. So for example, as I was talking with Nina, that, you know, she had her students do the investigation of fair dice, which made sense in the fact that she was in a statistics class. And so she wasn't doing as much as of the stuff directed to pedagogy. But having some initial kind of conversations about what it means to, what inferential reasoning is and kind of what key aspects there are to kind of promote this, can really kind of enhance, I think, students' experiences before they get into doing those investigations. So for example, this idea of considering variability, both within a sample and between samples, that we kind of bring that out in this document. And let me go back. The other thing that we've done throughout the inferential reasoning module is that CODAP experiences don't just live and engage with data. And videos of teachers and of classrooms don't just live in the learn from practice. We've kind of blended where those things might live, because we felt like we were placing them places that would best support connections that we wanted the learners to be making. So for example, in 8.1c, using models to build inferential reasoning, when we scroll down here, we talk about modeling, and we are very purposeful about embedding a CODAP file that people can interact with right on this page. So using more CODAPs embedded into a page, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Oops, that's the wrong way. So that they can kind of experience what's happening here with the sampler right without having to leave your page within your learning management system. So those of you that attended a session this past year, we went through this duck pond modeling as far as thinking about the sampler. But the sampler and the structures that the hierarchy table kind of afford are really critical for the inferential reasoning module. So let me just back up to kind of remind us that with inferential reasoning, we want to think about this idea of sometimes we are trying to take a situation, like in this example is a duck pond, and we want to model that real world phenomena and try to create a sampling experience that could be used instead of doing the actual duck pond game. And so we're creating a model of this game that we can use to actually play the game over and over again. And so it's important to match the model with the real world phenomena. Whereas with the Schoolopoly assignment, let me scroll down. I apologize for the scrolling. In the Schoolopoly assignment investigation, the model is hidden. And so we purposely wanted people to have the experience of modeling a scenario so that they understood how the sampling process happened in CODAP before doing the Schoolopoly assignment. And so just as Nina was saying that she thought it was really important with the Schoolopoly assignment for them to physically roll some dice, we felt like before people do an investigation where the model's actually hidden from them. So I'm going to open up let's just pick one of these. The model's hidden, so you can't see what the model of the die is. You're trying to figure out whether or not it's fair or unfair, and what the probability distribution is that is kind of guiding the behavior of this particular die company. And without necessarily having we felt like without having an experience of seeing data being generated from a model that you did know, that going with a hidden model might be a little disconcerting. So that was one of the reasons why we did that. And in here we go. 8.1G, we actually explicitly asked them to compare the duck pond game where the model was built and data is being generated versus the Scolopoly where there's 3 models that were built, but you don't know what they are. And data is also being generated from them. And can they kind of reflect about the use of models and modeling in those 2 different scenarios, and the way that CODAP could support or hinder inferential reasoning in both of those scenarios, and how it's supported kind of inferential reasoning. So the intent here was in this first part of the inferential reasoning to put 2 experiences up against each other that used models in different ways, but both experiences having data generated from those models. And those experiences don't live with both within the engage with data. So if you skip 8.1C, then it's not going to make sense to your students a whole lot to really do 8.1G. For those of you that are doing something face-to-face, I would encourage you to actually take 8.1C and this be something that is done in class together, or in a synchronous session like we're doing here, where you're really helping them kind of think critically about this modeling process. I purposely picked, just a fun scenario, but a scenario that the context and the situation had specific values in it that could easily map onto what was in the sampler. So the idea that it was 20% of ducks marked, and you could have important conversations about, well, what are the different ways we could model the 20% ducks? And thinking about that you're picking 3 ducks one at a time with replacement. And so what does that actually mean, and how does that correspond with what's in the sampler? And the fact that we're thinking about that we need to be prepared to give away after 50 students play the game. And so that's our sample size. So the number of students that we're going to repeat this 50 times, of each of them picking ducks, 3 ducks. So this idea of modeling and sampling from models is really strong in 8.1. And then we use that to build upon in 8.2. So this part is really new, right? None of you, I don't think anybody has actually, except for us on the team, I don't think we've had any faculty actually implement 8.2 yet. And this is where we've really blended thinking about embedding CODAP experiences, as well as embedding videos from teachers or classrooms in different places. So the 8.2 is very much a kind of an important reading a multimedia kind of reading to help your pre-service teachers really kind of unpack why samples, sampling, and sampling distributions really have this really strong role in inferential reasoning. And it's a deep reading, but we provide a link to an online stats book that could also allow you and or your students to supplement this with going into the statistics content a little bit deeper. So particularly for those of you that are teaching a statistics for teachers class, excuse me, or you're using this module in a course where you're trying to make strong connections between content and pedagogy, and there's time to actually dive a little bit deeper into the content. This is a free resource that we feel pairs well with this. But we have at the end of this reading, we decided to include a video conversation between myself and two teachers where they're really talking about how they try to build things up kind of in their own classrooms to make sure that students have this understanding of sampling and sampling distributions. And rather than put it in the learn from practice, we decided to put it here in this opening reading because it followed and it paired so well with what the pre-service teachers would just be reading. And so hopefully it will come to fruition that was a good choice. But it felt right. It felt right for us. The next one, the 8.2b, makes strong connections back to we're making connections back to the Common Core standards because we want teachers to realize that the role of inferential reasoning appears in the Common Core standards, but the concepts of sampling variability and the role of sample size is not made really explicit in the Common Core standards. And depending on how your state may unpack these, they might have unpacked these or adapted them or thrown them out and not used them at all. But the idea of that you have to attend to sampling variability and that sample size really kind of matters as far as the kinds of inferences that you can make isn't brought out as strongly as it should be if we're just looking at the standards. So we decided to take that kind of head on in this and help make those connections. So after we open up with this, we use a resource from Chris Wilde to help them kind of visualize this role of sampling variability. And it's a PDF that he's created that really walks through, you have your population distribution. Whoops. And actually, let me download this. This way. And we don't really get to see the population distribution. So the population distribution, in this case, he's talking about heights of girls age 12, that's the population distribution, but in statistics, we don't get to see that. We're trying to infer what that is. So you take a sample of size 30, and this is what you get to see. And so there's this little eyeball there of what you get to see. And there's a box plot overlaid on it. You take another sample of 30, and that's what you get to see. Or another person takes a different sample. And so if I keep clicking through here, I start getting to see this idea of visualizing sampling variability. That here's a sample of 30, here's another sample of 30, here's another sample of 30, and how this is all kind of bouncing around. All right. So he just in this PDF has many samples of 30 graphed individually to get this idea visually of how samples vary from each other. We felt like it was a powerful enough thing to use rather than trying to recreate it. So Chris let us use this and include it into our materials. He has this on his website at Auckland. And then we go into thinking more about this conceptual understanding through simulation and how you can think about using CODAP to help you with this. So here we've again embedded a document, and we've already collected a sample. So 20 samples of size 10 and 20 samples of size 50. Again, around thinking about female height. And so if we think about with CODAP, we can imagine that, so here's all of my 20 samples of size 10. And because this is embedded, I can overlay the mean and the median. And so in the PDF from Chris Wild, we were seeing samples one after another. And in here, we can see 20 samples stacked on top of each other. So that we can kind of see, oh, wow, look at the kind of bouncing around here when I have a sample size of 10. Well, let's go over here and add the mean in our box plots. And even though the range of some of our samples is just as extreme as some of the ranges over here, actually we have more extremes as far as just the range, but our boxes in the middle tend to be a little tighter, and our means jump around a lot less. Right? So getting at this idea that increasing the sample size is going to make over repeated samples, your mean is going to be a little bit more stable. We go down here a little bit further in thinking about, again, these are using some of Chris Wild's visualizations of how you can visualize sampling variability, and that we want students to have this sense of, so I'm going to point to this one over here on the right, that if you have this stable, what looks to be a very uniform or symmetric population distribution, with a sample size of 10, you know, you've got so much variability from sample to sample. With a sample size of 100, you have a lot less. But if you have a sample size of 1,000, your medians here are not moving that far away. And so trying to kind of ingrain an imagery and creating this mental imagery that sampling variability and sample size are key concepts that we really want students to think about. So these are intense kind of pages, and they feel a little bit different than some of the ones that we've had in the other materials, where it's just like a brief reading with maybe a table. They really are kind of diving deeper into the content and providing some interactive experiences that could be kind of, we feel that they're very important, but it could be, they're going to be heavy assignments and heavy things for your pre-service teachers to do. Before I continue on, I just want to pause and ask if, because I know we only have 5 minutes, and so I just want to stop and ask if there are any questions.
I don't have a question. I just want to say I think it's great you've included this. It's something that I supplemented my course with, as I thought it was such a powerful visualization. So yeah, I'm happy to see it's built in now. That's great.
Good, good. So we have in the learning from practice for 8.2, we have an example of in a classroom, students really kind of having conversations about variations between sampling, between samples. So a teacher is teaching this lesson. He's using both a hands-on and a technology experience. And then we have a reflection with the teacher. And oftentimes we don't get that kind of reflection with the teacher in our materials. And so that is that's a nice resource. And then the statistics tasks, this is a conversation with an expert panel where where in different parts they are sharing some of their favorite tasks to promote inferential reasoning. And we have the video kind of time-stamped, and we have a link to the tasks that they've shared. So also trying to bring forward more resources for you as a math teacher educator, as well as the pre-service teachers, to see more examples of good statistics tasks. And I'm not going to have enough time to really go through the engage with data, but I just want to briefly point out that if you're going to do the inferential reasoning module, it's really going to be critical, I think, for you as a faculty member to kind of go through and look at these learning materials and try these investigations yourself, because they may be new to you. The Paul the Octopus problem has been around for a while, so you may have seen this, but the critical thing here is that we're trying to build up this idea of we want to find out if something is unusual, and this is something that comes up in the video conversations of, if I repeat this event over and over and over again, is a particular outcome likely to happen or not? And how does it kind of compare to our kind of our initial null? And so in Paul the Octopus, it is this octopus kind of picking which box he's going to eat out of. And so with 2 boxes, you would assume that it's a 50% chance of choosing one box or the other. But Paul actually, in his predictions, it wasn't that he picked the same box all the time, but these boxes were labeled with the flags of countries that were playing a soccer game. And 8 times in a row, he went to the box of the soccer team that won the game. And, wow, that's kind of interesting. he got it right 8 times in a row. And what do we think about that? And is it really a 50% chance model? So the experience there is kind of thinking about this repeated event. And 8.2F is using a large vehicle data set to really investigate a claim that the EPA makes, that they estimate that a typical passenger vehicle emits an average of 404 grams of carbon dioxide per mile. And we use the sampler to actually sample from a large collection of vehicles and take a look at, well, if we just sample a set of vehicles, do we get an average a carbon dioxide that's anywhere close to 404? And can we take a look at repeated samples and think about whether we think that estimate of 404 seems accurate or not? So it's a different way of using the sampler. And we do have a video that explains how to sample from a larger data set with the sampler. And so that helps provide the support there. The last thing that I want to do, because it is already 1 o'clock, is just mention with the task design assignment that, where do I have it? That there are some critical parts in the other modules that really we feel help the pre-service teacher learn how to write a good task. All right. And eventually when we add what Liza did with her students, that will be an important part of our task design. But in the foundation module, 1.2C and J are really, J is the task analysis, looking at tasks and deciding if they're good or not. And 1.2C is a video conversation with experts around good statistics tasks and what makes a good statistics task. The 8.2D and G, I did not take a look at G with you guys, but it is an assignment at the end here about designing the launch of a task. So before you are asked to actually design a whole task, can you select a task, and all of these tasks are mentioned somewhere in this inferential reasoning module, and come up with an idea of if you were using this task in your classroom, how would you launch it? And how would you get the students to understand the context and get them engaged in it? And we feel like that experience is, we're not asking you to design a task, but just here's a task idea. How would you introduce it? How would you use it with your students? How would you bring their attention to the kind of critical aspects to it, so that when they're asked in a to write a full-blown lesson plan, that they have an idea of how might they get things going for their students. So that is 8.2G. And B.2G is in the association module. And that assignment is looking at, let's pull it up, B.2G is a video, and the reason I put this on here, it's a video of a classroom teacher using, a classroom teacher, and it happens to be Stephanie Casey co-teaching a lesson. And then this conversation afterwards about using CODAP in the classroom. And I think this teacher brings up a lot of interesting points about the ways that the students were able to engage with CODAP, and how that might impact thinking about designing tasks and lessons with CODAP. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. An hour and 45 minutes was definitely not enough time, but I'm sure all of us have lots of other things to attend to. But before we wrap it up, any comments or questions? No? Okay. Well, this recording will get posted, and we'll send you the slides, not just from me, but more importantly from the 3 faculty that shared with us today. So you'll get a PDF of those, and we'll also send out a link to the recording as well. So we wish you the best, the happiest of holiday seasons coming up, the wrapping up of semesters, being re-energized for the next semester that you are embarking upon. And please keep in touch with any issues, questions, comments that you have related to the esteem materials. All right. Thank you.